In the 1900s, films were typically very short and amateurist. More novelties than the full-length films we're used to today, being an average of 8 minutes each. But filming technology was moving a mile a minute, with films even in their early 1910s paling in comparison to the films in the late 1910s. Not only was the technology maturing, but so was the art form. Films were getting longer, filming techniques were getting cleverer, and the art form itself was starting to form its own professional identity. Sets, crews, and budgets were getting bigger, and the quality and narratives of films in return became much more refined. All this granted directors and writers more ability to make films that they wanted to make, now that limitations, technological and otherwise, were gradually disappearing. There were many famous and infamous films created during this decade, but today we will talk about the silent film Musketeers of Pig Alley by D.W. Griffith in 1912, which is considered the first official mob or gangster film and established the genre. Unlike more familiar mob films such as the classic The Godfather, Griffith's depiction of gangsters was not favorable in the slightest. You see, Griffith made the film criticizing real-life people and events. Mobs and gangs didn't just suddenly appear in the 1920s, nor did they only center around Chicago. You see, birth certificates, driver's license, ID cards, and all those sorts of documentation that we take for granted today did exist, but most people did not have such forms of identification even by 1910. This lack of documentation made policing very difficult. Unless you were able to catch someone red-handed, you were going to have a hell of a time catching criminals. Not only that, it was incredibly common for the police to overlook something or misplace evidence, as these gangs and mobs bribed or threatened them into compliance. This meant that policing was very ineffective, especially in crowded cities where crime flourished. Organized crime is a problem older than the country itself, and by the 1910s was not going anywhere. Griffith's film stood to shed light on the violence of organized inner-city crime and the corruption of the police and public officials. The film starts with Gish and her boyfriend Miller, a musician, who live in a tenement house. Miller goes out to earn money while Gish remains to look after her sick mother. Unfortunately, her mother dies, and in grief, Gish leaves the house only for Snapper to find and make advances on her. When Miller returns with the money, Snapper robs him and runs off. Later, one of Gish's friends talks her into attending the gangsters' ball, where one of the gangsters attempts to drug her. Snapper stops this, causing major tensions between the two groups of the gangsters. Snapper makes his escape, but not without being pursued, which soon escalates to shootout in the alleyway. During the fight, Snapper escapes not only the gangsters, but the police who arrive on the scene to break it up, punching an officer as he does so. During all this, Miller finds Snapper and retrieves his wallet. Miller goes home to celebrate the return of his money with Gish, but they are soon interrupted by Snapper himself, who explains to the two why he threw Gish's glass at the ball and why the two gangs were shooting at each other. Snapper leaves only to be immediately stopped by a police officer. He tells the officer that he was not involved in the shooting, as he was hanging out in the tenement the entire time. Miller and Gish affirm his story, and Snapper is free to leave. As the movie ends, we see Snapper being handed a wad of cash, and Giff and Miller embracing each other, letting the audience know that things will continue as they had been. Miller and Gish will stay together and be law-abiding citizens, while Snapper will go back to his gangster lifestyle. Contemporary audiences praised the film for its groundbreaking cinematography and gritty realism about gangster life in the slums of New York. Though untrue, it was reported at the time that Griffith used real gangsters as actors, only heightening the excitement surrounding the film. The film's conclusion, where Snapper escapes punishment with a false alibi, brought some criticism from audiences and is an example of pre-Hays Code freedom for directors. D.W. Griffith would direct not only this great movie, but nearly 520 films, with 41 of those films being feature films. He would retire from the industry in the early 30s when filming technology and cinema at large were still in their infancy compared to the modern day. It makes me wonder what he could have done with modern technology and technique.